Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
Life is but a dream. Considering how much time we spend dreaming, this isn't as strange as it sounds. What exactly is the dreamscape? What hidden secrets lie there? Is it related to trance journeys and altered states? Which is fantasy, our waking life, or the land of dreams? Mission Evolution Radio TV show is coming to you around the world on the Voice of Canada Broadcast Network, www.vocbn.ca. With us this hour to explore navigating the dreamscape is Norma J. Burton. Norma is a counselor with a degree in comparative religion focusing on Buddhist and shamanic traditions who specializes in trauma healing, shadow work, and dream analysis. Having apprenticed with indigenous elders for over 30 years, she founded the Journey to Completion, Institute of Ancient Healing Arts, and the Circle of Trust Healing Center. With her daughter, Nisha Burton, Norma co-authored the book Navigating Liminal Realms Psychonavigation Skills for Lucid Dreaming, Trance Journeys, and Altered States. Her website, normaburton.com. Norma, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure to be here with you.
We should have a lot of fun with this topic. It's kind of out of this world, isn't it?
It is. And in this world.
And in this world, yes. So Norma, how did you first become interested in dreams?
Well, having them so much as a child. I was a dreamer. I had many, many unusual dreams, and I was very lucky to have a grandmother who nurtured that and could talk to me about it. And she was very psychic. She was a doctor and a metaphysician too. So she was we lived near a Native American reservation, and she was the medical person for that. And people came to her with their dreams. So I grew up in a lineage of honoring the dream time. So that led me into it from a young age and had me value it.
Well, your grandmother sounds like she was well before her time.
She was, yes.
Yeah. So what may I ask what nationality she was?
Irish. She was 100% Irish.
Yes, I hear you there. The gifts kind of follow you like the leprechauns, you know. So how did you learn to do dream analysis?
Well, I'm a longtime student of the psychology of religious experience. Really majored in that in college, and I have a double undergraduate degree in psychology and religion, and then went into trauma healing work, which takes you into the study of the psyche. I was director of domestic violence shelters through the years, and then went back to graduate school, deeply immersed in depth psychology. It was the time when transpersonal psychology was just emerging. So I studied Jungian analysis and went through Jungian analysis myself, and researched different types of dream work from around the world. Got to study with different dream masters. So the dreams are such a significant part of our psyche and our psychology. So combining the psychology and the spirituality has always been my path.
So you have a degree in comparative religion, is that correct?
Yes.
I'm trying to remember your
I have several graduate degrees and combining religion and psychology. So comparative religions has been my pathway because I followed the mystical thread through all the religions, and they lead to a similar place, right? There's this mystical strand throughout all the major religions where the mystics were going into the dream time, an altered state, to connect with the divine and receive information and insight. So that's fascinating, isn't it? That all over the planet, in every religion, there is this mystical strand that's been leadership, leading the way in what spirituality becomes.
So in Christianity, where's the shamanic thread, if you will, the journey
I
thread?
love that question. When I was in college, which was in the early 70s, there was very little written about mysticism. Julian of Norwich was one of them, and St. John of the Cross. So very little. But then as the years evolved in the 80s, 90s, all this work was done, led by Matthew Fox, who was a great scholar of our times, of the medieval mystics. So now there are so many books out about Hildegard of Bingen, Meister Eckhart, all the different mystics of the Middle Ages. And it's said that there's this mystical thread, or this creation-centered spirituality thread, that has always been there through Judeo-Christian history, but it tends to be subjugated and made less important in contrast to what's called the fall redemption type of theology. So the mystical thread tends to say we are originally blessed, not originally cursed. Right at the beginning, we have connection with the divine, that we have the divine within us, and so that we have that access. Every human has that access. So that's the beauty of a creation-centered spirituality. And that is there in the Judeo-Christian lineage.
Well, if you look at the recountings of Christ's life, 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness, sounds like a vision quest to me.
Right? That was a vision quest. And I hope this isn't too sacrilegious for people, but I often say that he is the greatest shaman, one of the greatest shamans that we have record of, because he went to the underworld and dealt with the shadow and resurrected and came back with a great message for us. So that's what a shaman does.
You and I are in agreement on that one. I love reading his life, because all of that kind of is hidden underneath the scriptures. But it stands out once you read it with an eye to that, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So your bio says you focused on studies on Buddhist and shamanic traditions. Most people don't associate the two.
Mm-hmm.
Is there shamanism in Buddhist practices?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. The different strands of Buddhism have different degrees of shamanism within them. So, for example, if you think about Tibetan Buddhism, they use a lot of iconography that came from the mountain shamans of Tibet. So Buddhism came in after shamanism into Tibet and then merged with it. Similar thing happened in Japan. I lived in Japan for many years and found my way into a sect of Buddhism called Shugendo, which was closely related to the mountain shamans. Kukai was the founder of it, and he went to China and received this Tibetan lineage of Buddhism, and then came into Japan and related to the mountain shamans of Japan, which was the nature religion that was already there. And then he blended Buddhism and shamanism into this Shugendo sect. And then it evolved into the Tendai, which is more well-known sect of Buddhism. So yes, right, you can hear that it was an ongoing syncretism between Buddhism and shamanism in some sects of the religion, just like happened all over the world, right? The nature religion of the people that was there already was taken over by the dominant religions as they came along in the last 5,000 years and blended into what is presented as that religion of our times, right? So the earlier religion, which there's a book out called The Immortality Key, The Religion with No Name. He's saying that there was this religion with no name behind it all in the earlier times on the planet that was nature-based, mystical, shamanic spirituality.
When Buddhism was brought to the Americas here, it seems like they kind of filtered out the shamanic aspect, and it's pretty much very top heavy. Is that accurate, or is it just my perception?
Well, there's so many different types of Buddhism. Living in Japan, I got to experience there. In Japan, there's like 368 types of Buddhism, and we don't realize that in the United States because we tend to get exposed to just one of them or two of them. But when you think about it, we have the Zen lineage that's come into the United States, which is very powerful here. And that tends to be more just mental oriented. But even then, they're going into an altered state, into a samadhi state. But they're studying the mind. That's the focus of it. But Tibetan Buddhism also came into the United States. And so that did bring this lineage that's much more deity oriented and shamanic. So we have that in the United States too. But that's why I wanted to live in a Buddhist country, because we get it filtered through to us here, right? And I wanted to be there and experience it for myself.
So, how many other religious traditions incorporate shamanism? You said that a lot of the religions were originally earth-based, and then when the other ones slid in, they kind of blended them a little bit. Is that pretty much across the board?
I think so. You know, when you think about Judaism, it's there. When you think about Islam, there's shamanism in that. Hinduism, there's a lot of imagery of animal-human combinations, right? And their gods and goddesses. That's shamanic. Because what happens in our shamanic drumming journeys is that we come in contact with animal beings who are our guides, right? So you can see that really clearly in Hinduism. You can see that in Tibetan Buddhism. And, you know, living in Japan, I was amazed that every city I went around to, or small town area, had at their gate or on their buildings an animal. So, for example, there was the fox city, there was the crow city, the monkey city. Fascinating, huh? And that still exists in the United States and throughout Europe too. When you go around Europe to all the different towns, you see they had an animal totem. So it's there, just underneath the surface, this connection with what we call a shamanic understanding of our interbeingness with the animal and the plant worlds, that we have this animistic connection as sentient beings with all the other beings. That did get squelched in the evolution of modern Christianity, right? There was a cutting off of us from nature, a fear of nature, and a cutting off of our psyches from our interbeingness with other creatures, other beings. And we also judged and limited what we called consciousness or conscious, right? As science came along in the Enlightenment, it tended to not give that assigned consciousness to animals.
And it's all been to our detriment. I mean, you see the way we treat animals on the planet now, I think, is a direct reflection of that, isn't it?
Right, right. So thankfully, this kind of consciousness that we're talking about, mystical consciousness, the interbeingness with other earthling beings, is coming back, right? There's such a huge renaissance of an interest in altered states and in multidimensional reality and in our interbeingness and in taking care of nature. So in that way, even though we're living in the damage of the Enlightenment and that cutoff, we're also living in a time of reawakening.
Of Renaissance. Well, Norma, it's time, and you and I need to take a station break. Norma and I will return very shortly, so don't you go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. What is shamanism anyway? With us this hour discussing altered states of consciousness is Norma Burton. Norma is the author of Navigating Liminal Realms Psychonavigation Skills for Lucid Dreaming, Trance Journeys, and Altered States. Her website, normaburton.com. Norma, give us a definition of, I'm going to put it in your report here. Give us a definition of shamanism that kind of applies to all the ones you've been talking about.
Oh, wonderful. Shamanism is an ancient spirituality on our planet that involves a calling to go into the underworld, first of all. It's an initiatory calling. Initiation is a word that is very present in shamanism, and it has 3 beats to it, meaning 3 stages of it. The calling to go down and into our psyche, into our unconscious, and symbolically into the underworld. First beat. Second beat is when you get down there in the underworld, you will encounter something difficult. Shadow, your unowned parts, your lost soul. So you're going there for a soul retrieval. Parts of ourselves get separated off from us in trauma. So that's basically what that's saying. And then the third beat is the return. And when you come back out of the underworld, you return to your tribe that you left from, and you're integrating the information that you got by sharing it with them and teaching them what you learned. So that initiatory journey is primary to shamanism all over the planet. And all over the planet, people have used drums to induce the trance state, to take people into this other state of consciousness, as well as dreams. So dreaming and drum journey work are endemic to shamanism too.
What about things like the didgeridoo, rattles, the Sufi dancers? Are those also?
Good point, right? Those are all ways of inducing an altered state. Like it's said that Rumi, who's the great poet of Islam and Sufism, that his beautiful poems would be uttered after he'd gone into the altered state through dancing. Mm-hmm. And he would dance and dance and dance and then speak out these poems, and his followers would write it down. So, right, that kind of trance state, the other instruments that can take you into the trance state. But drumming is its own particular and important instrument because it harmonizes our heartbeat with what's called the heartbeat of the earth, or a certain megahertz that takes us into a certain trance level.
What happens to our brain waves when we go into trance?
Right. Our brain waves are definitely affected, and there have been a lot of scientific studies about that. It's been shown that our brain waves are taken down a certain level from the delta into alpha. We want to get there to that lower brainwave state where we can then, we're still awake, which is the wonderful part of it. If somebody touched you, you'd be right there awake, but your brain frequencies have relaxed so that you're open to receiving from other dimensions other than just our ordinary reality consciousness.
So, when we're referring to dreams, very often all the animals as symbol is metaphoric or allegory. Is it the same with the shamanic journey, with the information you're getting, and even all the ones like the gods and goddesses that have been worshipped through shamanism throughout the ages? Are those allegorical in nature as well?
You're asking great questions. The experience with meeting an animal in the altered state through the drumming journey is lucid. It's very real. It is allegorical in the sense of, we have stories about the meaning of these animals all through ancient times, but it's a direct experience of meeting this being in a gnosis, the Greek word for direct experiencing of it. So it's amazing because you really are forming an intimate relationship with a being that's very real, and it grows. You learn who this being is, and it communicates to you. So people don't realize how in depth, how intimate, how taking you to places in your psyche that you've never been. This works on you that way. So it's a very real experience to encounter this animal being.
So are the animal beings that you encounter, are they kind of like a representation of the entire animal tribe, or is it an individual?
People talk about it that way, like they say, the bear, I met the bear, or the whale, but when you do this deeper kind of shamanic work, it's an individual being that's particular, that looks a particular way, that might have particular barnacles as the whale, or particular coloring in its fur as the leopard. So you are meeting a particular being that's your connection. and that feels very deeply personal.
Do the traits that these beings represent in their animal form, like a bear hibernates, et cetera, are those traits that we can relate back and they show the strengthening that this animal is giving us that we probably need?
Exactly, right? It's no accident who that animal is for you. I'll just go into saying that I teach the journey to completion, which is a year-long deep process of going in over and over into the dream time through your dreams and through the drumming journey. And you keep the same power animal through that whole experience. You find out about who is your power animal by a particular ancient test that's called the test of 4. So you must see this animal from 4 aspects of itself or coming at you from 4 directions. And then you know, this is my being for this time of my life. So you go on and on with it over a long period of time and get to know it very deeply. And I like to speak to that because a lot of times people are just more superficial with it, like they'll draw a card and say, oh, I got the bear today or the next day, so they're not really going deeply into getting to know this one particular being. That's how it's supposed to be.
It seems like when we're casual with this, we sure miss a lot, don't we? A lot of people just like to skim the surface and not go deep because we don't know what we're going to find there, right?
Right. I mean, I guess we can be thankful that at least they're skimming the surface, that they're at least encountering this idea that the animals are there for us. Like Rudolf Steiner said that the animals are given to humans as a little lower than the angels to be our helpers and guides. So at least people are beginning to tune into that. But our book, the Navigating Liminal Realms and our Lucid Dreaming, Lucid Living are trying to help people understand that there's so much more to it. There's so much more to explore.
So this is kind of a hot topic. Where do you stand on appropriation of ceremony?
Oh, it's a great hot topic, right? Of course, appropriation is not good, and it happens all the time. But when you think about what is appropriation, it's not giving credit where credit is due. It's not claiming the lineage that it's coming from. And it's often superficial in that maybe a person has just studied something for a few weeks and then proclaims that they can teach it. So we really try to teach people that it's really important to study within a lineage and to then honor that lineage and name, who you studied with, and to get permission. Have you gotten permission from your lineage to say that you can speak this forth? And then to give credit, always give credit. For me, for example, I always say that I studied with such and such, such and such. One of those is the Huichol in central Mexico, and that after 20 years of being with them, Grandmother Guadalupe said, I give you permission to teach what I've taught. So that's really important for Westerners to not rush like they do into taking a hold of something. And then oftentimes it's for the sake of making money off of it too, which is what indigenous people are sad about, So that's another thing about not appropriating. Do you give back to the lineage that it came from? Do you find ways of being reciprocal? And so that's all. Does that help with the appropriation topic? Yeah,
absolutely. Because I know that, particularly in the beginning of the New Age movement, there were various teachers that borrowed a little bit from this tradition and borrowed a little bit from that tradition and kind of, well, it was definitely appropriation without permission, wrote books on it and all sorts of stuff. And I can understand how that would be upsetting to the people
yes,
that is being, because it's not well represented. It's not
right.
thoroughly gone into. If you're going to ride a horse, you need to learn how to ride a horse rather than hopping on its back and then hopping back off. So yeah.
And then there's also the element of that European culture came in and killed the Native Americans.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
it was a taking from them in so many ways. And so it's so sensitive in that way too, that we are needing to pay back, needing to honor, needing to recognize Native people are amongst us still. It's not something from the past. Honor the people that are with us, all of that. And, just speaking to myself, I was so blessed to grow up with the family that I did, because I was taken to the Tonawanda Indian Reservation by my lineage, because my grandparents moved there during the Depression to be of service. So my grandfather opened a grocery store, and my grandmother was the medical person for the tribe. And so all through the years, they gave away the groceries because people couldn't afford it. And my grandfather, when he died, said to write off the tab, just let it be. And so the Native people did a big ceremony to adopt my grandmother into the tribe. It was the Seneca Iroquois tribe, and it was such a memorable and important part of my growing up. So I was trained growing up to honor the lineage and to, in all of the bicultural ways that I didn't even realize how much it was a bicultural upbringing until my 20s when I look back on it.
So we talked about how a lot of the shamanic practices have an awful lot in common. And there have been ones that have taken what they have in common without taking the ceremonies of any particular tribe. Where do you stand on that?
Right. There again, if the person that's doing it is blending a lot, they should definitely honor the lineages that they are drawing from, name them, and have gotten permission. Always syncretism is going to take place, right? That's a study of religion word that means through all of history, people move about and learn different styles of spirituality and combine them. It's always going to be happening. It happened in South America when African people came there, combined with the Amazonian Native people. A new syncretism arose in the Candomblé religion, the Espiritu religion. Same thing happened in the United States, as people came from all over, the blendings happen. They just happen, right? Mm-hmm. It's a way that it is. And also, in a sense, each new generation takes what has come behind them and makes something new out of it. So that's always going to happen. We just have to accept that. But when there's social justice issues involved, like we're talking about, and taking it too quickly and claiming to be an expert at it, there's adjustments that need to be made so that those misuses of power don't take place.
I'm absolutely with you. Well, it's time for us to take another station break. Norma and I will be right back to continue this discussion. So you stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. I know what a psycho is, and I know what navigation is. But what is psychonavigation? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing navigating unseen realms is Norma Burton. Her website, normaburton.com. So, Norma, there's the question. What is psychonavigation?
Well, I just picked up the book right before you said that, Navigating Liminal Realms, and opened up to what is psychonavigation. It's on page 27. And, psycho, we can break down the word, means psyche. So the human soul, mind, or spirit. Within psychology, the psyche is the totality of the mind, both the conscious and the unconscious parts. And then navigation, the process or activity of accurately ascertaining one's position and planning and following a route. So if you're psychonavigating, you're navigating your consciousness.
So you probably want a map. So let's talk about intention. Why is it so important in psychonavigation?
Intention is everything, said Carlos Castaneda. When we set our intent, we are, for one thing, taking the time to get clear on what are you doing here? Why are you doing this? We have, I say that we have two parts to our intent always, and this is, again, learning this from the Huichol. We have an intent that is about our positive goal, and we have what I call the negative intent, or the intent to look at the shadow. So in every intent, we need to think about, I want this, I must have this, therefore I'm willing to look into the shadow of this. So for example, you might want a healthy, happy relationship. Therefore, I'm willing to look into the shadow in the past of discord and the trauma of being overpowered by another person, or not speaking my truth, or, so you've got to look at that in order to attain the positive that you're going after. It doesn't really work just to go after the positive, because the shadow's always there in the package deal with it. So setting the intent is very important as you go into the altered state, the underworld, the unconscious, the dream time. Your intent organizes what will happen. And also your intent will be accomplished.
So is going into the shadow, because I think that one of the things that I've noticed is our unconscious intent really is a fly in the ointment when we're trying to go for a goal. We have intent, but we also have a lot of things working. Is that the shadow you're talking about? Working in the shadow?
Right. So when you go into the unconscious and into the underworld, you're going with the willingness to explore the fly in the ointment, the things that are triggering you and tripping you up. Right? So you don't know it all before you go in there. But I find that people do have a pretty good inkling of what the shadow material is that they need to explore. So in the very beginning, I help people name and get clear on, I have this inkling about it. But then we talk about leaving some skin at the door, too. That's a terminology that my sweat lodge teacher from the Cheyenne tradition taught me, leaving some skin at the door. So right at the doorway of going into the altered state, you're letting go of resistance, you're letting go of your doubts and fears, and you're trusting into it. So you enter in perfect love and perfect trust. When you first get in there, that's why it's important. The first intent in entering the underworld is to meet your guide. So the power animal is the first task when you enter the dream time through the drumming journey, because then you're linked up with your inner guidance system, your guide.
Yeah, I would think that you'd want some guidance in there because so when you're journeying or going into to find your intent, to find your move through the shadow, is spiritual healing oftentimes necessary so a person can do that effectively?
Sometimes I actually send a person away from doing shamanic drumming because they're not quite ready for it, because they need to be able to ground themselves more, meaning be more stable in their environment, in their ordinary reality. So they might just need more time to get a stable living environment. You have to be stable in certain ways to be able to go into the underworld or into the unconscious effectively. You might also need to go and learn to meditate more, learn to focus your mind and be able to concentrate. If the mind is too much distracted, like the monkey mind running all over, then it will be hard to concentrate in the shamanic journey. So there are preparatory things that need to be done before even approaching the shamanic journey. But then we are all having dreams all the time. So our dream time is also preparing us, just naturally. Lots of times people get scary dreams, nightmares, and that can be a calling to come to more dream work or more shamanic work, because they need help in figuring out what's happening. So, right? In other words, we're being called all the time to become grounded enough to be more whole and to be able to enter the dream time and receive the gifts from it. That's a very good question,
Thank you. Well, another thing that stands out in most all shamanic traditions are the shamanic initiations, and some of them can be pretty brutal. Buried up to here in the sand, left overnight, vision quests, going without food, water, fasting, sitting on a hillside. What's the purpose of those? And
Right.
yeah,
All of those are as we're talking about, right, helping a person to get grounded. If you're buried up to here, like I've actually led Vision Quest retreats where we dug our own grave.
Delightful.
6 feet down, a lot of work for several days, and then take turns laying in that all night long.
Mm.
So talk about grounding, so there's many ways that humans need to, in a way, pull back from their addictions, pull back from their distractions, and come back to their body, come back to a sense of being on the earth and quiet enough in their minds to be able to receive the messages from the numinous realms. So yeah, all of those practices have been, I think, to get people in their bodies and get ready. Some of them can go to extremes. They can. I think that asceticism in all different religions has gone awry lots of times, to the point of, why would a person need to be hurt or hurt themselves? Well, they're, in a sense, they're using that pain to get in touch with their pain, but that's not really a very healthy method to get in touch with the pain. We can do it in a milder way, in a softer and gentler way. And that's an interesting point, because I studied with mainly female shamanic teachers. And sometimes I wonder if there's a difference between the feminine yin lineage of shamanism and the masculine lineage of it. When you think about the difference between the genders, maybe there's, a need for more control and more containment, or more strength in bringing somebody present sometimes, right? So that's another consideration too.
Well, what about the theory that is about shattering your persona, your false personas, your false beliefs, your attachment to things that don't matter? Are the initiations designed to do a certain amount of shattering as well?
Very good point. The word shattering has a violence to it, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was brought up in the lineages like the Huichol that taught dismemberment. So
Mm-hmm.
that has a violent aspect to it too. But then what I say about that is that you're taken very gradually when you're brought through it in a true lineage. It's a slow, gradual process. And the whole first part of it for years for me was learning to trust my power animal and to trust it to take me through anything. Meister Eckhart talks about that. He says we have to, befriend God within us, and then eventually trust God to kill us. Same kind of thing with the power animal, befriending it over years and years, and then eventually trust it to dismember us. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of times this is one of the errors of appropriation or Western practices, is that they don't mind the boundaries, and therapists can come crashing in on people's psyches and not take it in an organic way that the psyche is leading the way. So that's a gift from nature and from our shamanic teachers, is to go slow and to not, presume to, as a teacher even, to cross people's boundaries. That can catapult people into crises, into psychotic episodes. And so we really need to be attuned to our inner guidance system as leaders too, and to the other person's right to follow their own timing, right? So that's all very important, to respect the boundaries and go slow.
So what are the pitfalls of exploring altered states?
Well, we're kind of talking about that, right? By saying that if you do move too rapidly and your unconscious is not ready to offer up this particular information, it can be traumatizing to remember things that you're not ready to. So we have to take it carefully. And the journey to completion, for example, is set up step by step to help people remember things gradually. So that's one of the problems, is that the psyche can get flooded. Like I've counseled several people that had psychedelic experiences that they weren't ready for, and then remained in a dissociated state and had a hard time coming back into ordinary reality. So that is a danger of it. Another danger is that you have to really trust who you're doing it with. They talk about the importance of set and setting in psychedelics use, for example. Set and setting means who are you with and what is the ambiance of the situation. So there can be misuse of power by the people that are leading it that can take advantage of people. So you have to really be careful who you choose and feel safe in the situation.
Which leads us to our next one is, how does one integrate their experiences from trance states into their daily life, and what's the value?
Right. Integration is such an important part of having an experience in an altered state to bring it back into your ordinary reality and integrate it into your life. So, for example, in the Journey to Completion format, you carefully enter into the altered states more and more deeply until you come to the inception point of the trauma wound, where you can then see it all for the truth of what happened, and then get the gift from that and transmute the shadow energies. And then you come into a whole phase of what I call practicing the change in your perspective. So you're back in your ordinary reality, and circumstances will come to you that are similar to what caused the trauma wound, but you're able to see it differently, have a different perspective, and act differently over and over and over again. But you're in this practicing of the change in perspective for a while, usually 6 months to a year, before it's fully integrated. And then I have people hold a celebration feast in which they bring together their community and they say, hey, I've gone through this whole journey and I've changed. I've really thoroughly changed, and I want to proclaim it to you and have you support me in this new way of being. So then that really integrates it.
It's time for another station break. Norma and I will be back to explore lucid dreaming, journey trances, and altered states. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. But what if I get stuck there? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Norma Burton, her website, normaburton.com. So Norma, there's probably a certain amount of fear if I get in there real well. What if I get lost? What if I get stuck? Will I come back out? Are there instances where a person isn't well trained and doesn't really return to the normal world completely?
Well, we're talking about psychonavigation, right? Which is about finding your way in your psyche. So there are protective things that we can do in order to make sure you can find your way out. And some people do have difficulty with that. One shaman from South America I was talking to recently said people are going to all of the shamans down there and having intense psychedelic experiences, and they're watching it happen in people that they're going up the ladder, they call it. Like it's sort of like going up the chakras or up and out and not knowing how to come back down. So that training of how to navigate your own energy system is very important so that you don't get stuck or lost or dissociated. The book, the Navigating Liminal Realms, is teaching people that there are precursors to doing the more extreme altered state journeys that have always been there in our indigenous cultures to train people in navigating their dreams. And then how do we lucid dream? And navigating through the lucid drumming journeys will help prevent you from getting lost because you are trained step by step in the maps of your own inner consciousness. There's a general map that the Journey to Completion is a representation of that. The hero's journey was very familiar to us nowadays, but when I was working with the Huichol, the book of Joseph Campbell called The Hero's Journey hadn't come out yet. So I was experiencing the hero's journey with the indigenous tribe teaching it to me. And a few years later, the book on the hero's journey came out, and Joseph Campbell had gone to cultures all over the world and seen this similar pattern of this map of consciousness that humans travel upon to retrieve their lost soul parts, to accomplish this hero's journey. So now that's very familiar to us. And that is a navigational map, right? A general one. And then we have our own particular terrain within our psyches and our unconscious that we have to discover step by step. So we need to be careful and guided step by step in going in a safe way so that we don't get stuck in there. But if you do get stuck in there, there's help. I always say, if you feel destabilized, call on an ally. Talk to somebody. Don't stay there alone. There are good, teachers and guides around, and you must call on an ally.
So you do trauma work, and when people have been extremely traumatized, oftentimes, don't they end up in an altered state? Okay. Can you use this in reverse? In other words, find a person's way back into the grounded ordinary reality if they have been traumatized to a point that they're disassociated and they're in an altered state.
Right. When we are traumatized, we go up and out, meaning we leave our bodies. And the first sign of being traumatized is you might feel confused, because that's the beginning of going up into the mind and not understanding. So whenever you hear the word confusion in somebody, you can think, oh, they've probably been traumatized. Mm-hmm. So this going up and out is what happens in trauma. So in trauma healing, what have we got to do? Come back down and in. So one of the first things that we do is try to help a person feel their hips on the chair, feel their feet on the earth. When first responders go out to a car accident, they're trained to have a person sit down on the ground, and they ask them, can you feel yourself on the earth? Can you feel your feet? If the person can't feel their feet, they might put a backpack on their feet or something to help them feel the weight of coming back down into their body, right? So this going down into the earth is so interesting that way, because shamanically, the leaders knew that people needed to come back down and in, and literally down, not just into their bodies, but down deep into the earth to reground and to find out, to go in there and find out what caused the trauma, what caused the dissociation. We've got to go to that inception point of the cause and heal it there. So yes, coming down and in. That's what we call grounding, right? A person has to get grounded over and over. So I have people go very carefully with looking at their trauma. I have them do a trauma timeline of a chronological look at their traumas. And if they're writing the trauma timeline and they start to feel confused or dizzy or scared, I say, stop, put it aside, go outside in nature and walk, ground yourself, look at the sky, feel the earth. You got to come back in our bodies, then you can approach it again.
Well, our whole society has become less and less and less grounded, more disassociated from the earth. There's gobs of people that never are on the earth. They go up to their high rise, they go down to their parking garage, they drive on rubber, they get to their parking garage of their office. And I mean, fresh air and grounding and being part of nature is absolutely gone for a lot of people. What impact do you see that is having on us?
When you think about the worlds we live in, right? And you live in your house and you look around, and almost every single thing that we interact with is man-made. It's not bad, but we're not being with nature often enough, as you say. So getting out into nature is super important in trauma healing work and shamanic healing work, because in nature we're with, created a reality that has so much consciousness in it that we're interacting with, that's teaching us and helping us and guiding us. So that's something I always recommend right away. Like, can you change your schedule around so that you can spend some time in nature every day? And your question was, what's the effect on our culture of not having that? Well, we can see it in the statistics that people are more depressed. We've been called the Prozac nation, like people being on medications because they're disoriented and depressed and they can't find connection with themselves. So there are a lot of bad consequences for getting too far away from our bodies and from nature. That's such an important call to come back.
There's an old song, I think the words go, "I'm tired and I'm wasted and I can't find my way home." That pretty much describes it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, how can psychonavigation contribute to personal evolution?
When you think about psychonavigation done by mystics through the ages, they are going to a consciousness that's greater than our own to receive information, to receive healing, guidance. Even Einstein often said that he got quantum physics knowledge from the dream time, right?
Mhm.
So we need that more than ever now. The problems that are confronting us through climate change and political situations are huge. And we really need to go to the numinous realm, the altered state, the higher consciousness to receive help and information. So that is happening. People all over the planet are being called again to remember that altered states are available to us. The mystical realms are part of our inheritance. So we've got to go there, especially now, because the problems at hand are so huge, right? We've got to have help. And we have so much more capacity and potentiality in our consciousness than we typically take the time for. Like Jean Houston, one of my teachers, said, we only use maybe 10% of our potentiality of our consciousness. So it's time. It's really time. And I think the whole evolution of artificial intelligence so rapidly is also calling people to value who we are as these consciousness conduits, these beings whose minds are able to access so much information and as vast as the universe. We are amazing beings and creations, and all that's happening is calling us to value that and spend time in the inner realms and connecting with the mystical realms so that we can evolve in a better way.
One of the things we're confronted with now is copious amounts of misinformation and polarization. And if we're in our minds and we're not grounded, aren't we more susceptible to that?
Right. One thing we talk about in the Lucid Dreaming book is that one of the first stages of becoming a lucid dreamer is to question reality. Question what is really being presented to you. So we really have to do that now with AI merging realities in ways that are trying to fool us. So that calling is to become more discerning. We really need to practice removing the delusions and illusions that we have been living in to protect ourselves. But I say eventually our shadow protections, our defense mechanisms become dysfunctional and keep us away from what we need to know. So I think that's happening en masse right now, right? We've got to be spending time discerning, removing the delusions and the lies and the illusions, and coming to what the Buddhists call tathagata, which is reality such as it is. We can come to that. Nowadays, people think you can't even reach reality such as it is, but we can. We can come to discern reality and then build from that truth and structures that are accurate and healing.
Never was a time when it was more needed. So it's that time of the show. We're about out of time, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, Norma, what's your mission?
My mission is to help people become more aware and to have the skills to travel into the unconscious and the dream time in a successful way so that they can bring forth this numinous knowledge and help heal themselves and our planet one person at a time, beginning with themselves.
As you're living your purpose, and your mission, what do you find is the single most important thing you'd like to get out there for people?
I'd like to have people realize that there are these precursors to the more extreme altered states that they can practice on a daily basis, like write down your dreams, beckon your dreams to come to you, um, find out about other ways to go into the dream time, like the drumming journeys, become more lucid, more awake in your life so that you can make good choices and heal your trauma wounds and therefore use power correctly. So that
Beautiful.
yeah.
Beautiful way to go. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Norma, thank you so much for coming on the
Thank
show and sharing
you.
your
Well,
wisdom.
what a great deep exploration you've helped us to have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our guest this hour has been Norma J. Burton, the author of Navigating Liminal Realms Psychonavigation Skills for Lucid Dreaming, Trance Journeys, and Altered States. To find out more about Norma, where you can find her book and all she has to offer, visit her website, normaburton.com. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy our past archived episodes, visit www.missionevolution.org. But please be sure to join us right here again on the Voice of Canada Broadcast Network, vocbn.ca, where this mission will continue, bringing you information, resources, and support for an evolving world.